Now, a lot of INFJs do say about themselves that they are hypersensitive, okay? And it's become a kind of it's become fashionable or trendy to say that, you know, a certain person identifies as a highly sensitive person or is generally hypersensitive. Now, just because it is a bit of a trend and we've all seen that, of course, that does not mean that it doesn't exist, right? But we have to be careful and really imagine that hypersensitive, a hypersensitive temperament um, is probably quite a bit rarer than we think. Because again, if we listen to people, if we really listen to people, everybody is hypersensitive these days, okay? And it's not possible that everyone is hypersensitive. And I think that if you really know you are a hypersensitive type, it's enough to just go out, take a bus ride or go to a crowded place, uh, busy, noisy, with weird lighting fixtures and stuff like that, and noticing that most people seem quite okay with what's going on, to realize that a lot of people like to portray themselves as hypersensitive or think themselves hypersensitive when they're not hypersensitive. But again, there definitely are hypersensitive people. And the interesting question to ask is what makes INFJs likely to be or not likely to be hypersensitive? Okay. Um, so my view is that when we're dealing with the INFJ type, we are dealing with a type that is frequently going to be truly hypersensitive as well as INFJ. And there are reasons for that. I have two reasons in mind, and as you're going to see, they are closely connected. So the first reason that comes to mind, right, for constitutional hypersensitivity on the part of INFJs is that INFJs most often struggle with their inferior SE, right? And INFJs have this weird relationship with SE where there is a part of them that wants to integrate it further, and there is another part of them that doesn't want to integrate it further because, in a sense, inferior SE is what existentially makes their sense of being alienated from external reality. And living with that experience ends up forming a kind of identity, a singularity, as this kind of alienated being. So an INFJ can paradoxically become quite attached to their alienation. And integrating SE more necessarily will involve a more subdued, right? A more low-key form of alienation, what I like to call a de-severed alienation, less severance in the alienation. But for a lot of INFJs, there is an unconscious resistance when the fact of having become alienated is actually something that is prized, beloved, okay? Most INFJs would not consciously tell you that. They will tell you that they want to overcome alienation, that they want to belong, they want to, be like other people more. But, anyone psychoanalytically inclined would tell you that what you want to look for is the unconscious motives and the unconscious benefits, which are often quite distinct and sometimes even opposite to what's said openly and consciously. So INFJs often have this unconscious recoil from engaging in too much SE and integrated too much SE because it feels almost like a little dirty. If you notice, it's a lot easier for an INFJ to have a discourse about morality, about ethics, about religion, about purity, than to have a discourse about messiness, about transgression, about, topics that are usually considered kind of dirty. INFJs are very kind of almost timid or shy when it comes to these things, consciously speaking. That's because, again, the whole domain of purity is part of the self-image of the INFJ personality. And SE is seen as this not very pure kind of function. The thing is, the less you engage SE, the less SE is integrated, the more the domain of the bodily in general is going to be alien. But if the domain of the bodily is alien, if you are in a sense alien to your own body, if you're disembodied in many ways existentially, you're not going to be able to incarnate the experience that brings you into the world, brings you against people, dealing with stimuli, because all this goes through the body. But if you're disembodied, if you're alienated from your embodiment, these experiences are going to be felt as intrusive and violent. And that's the hypersensitivity. And the way in which this is linked to the other, quite briefly, the way in which this is linked to the other cause of INFJ hypersensitivity is that this relationship to SE, you could say that at the level of functions, because you could tackle this issue from many different angles, and I've done this before, but at the level of functions, non-integration of the SE function, chronic non-integration of the SE function, is the quintessential INFJ neurosis, and the INFJ types that are leaning toward insecure, are all neurotic in their various, ways. And we all know that, the more neurotic you are, the more hypersensitive you are. Okay? So let me know in the comments what you thought, guys. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video. Helps big time with the referencing. Don't forget my latest book on the INFJ, The Infinite Soul, on INFJ life in the modern world, which you can check at the first link below. Get the book today if you haven't yet. And also get the prequel, The Ecstatic Soul, which is nothing else than the deepest investigation of the INFJ mind. Okay? And the link is also below. And as usual, guys, I could not do it without you, so please consider supporting me on Patreon. I need you more than ever. If you do join my Patreon, you get access to our Discord server as a perk, as well as a bonus video, deep dive on a topic of your choosing every 2-3 weeks. Thank you so much, and talk to you soon, guys. Bye-bye.